Welcome to Canadian Rant, where we break down the policies shaping your paycheck, your rights, and your future. If you care about freedom, fairness, and facts, hit that subscribe button and let's dive in. Canada just introduced Bill C-9, and it's stirring up serious debate. Officially titled the Combating Hate Act, this bill aims to amend the criminal code to tackle hate propaganda, hate crimes, and protect access to religious and cultural spaces. So what's changing? Bill C-9 creates new criminal offenses for intimidating or obstructing access to places like mosques, synagogues, schools, and community centers. It also criminalizes the public display of certain hate or terrorist symbols, with some exemptions for legitimate use. The government says this is about safety. With hate crimes more than doubling in recent years, they argue stronger laws are needed to protect vulnerable communities and ensure Canadians can live freely and safely. But critics aren't convinced. Civil liberties groups warn that Bill C-9 could go too far. By removing the Attorney General's oversight for hate propaganda charges and lowering the legal threshold for what counts as hatred, the bill may risk criminalizing peaceful protest and legitimate dissent. Some fear it could disproportionately impact marginalized groups, the very people it claims to protect. So what's the impact? If passed, Bill C-9 could reshape how Canada handles hate speech and protest. Supporters see it as a step toward justice. Opponents worry it's a threat to free expression. What do you think? Is this a necessary shield or a dangerous sword? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the laws shaping our lives. This is Canadian Rant. Let's see what are the thoughts about rants.
I have three serious concerns about Bill C-9. First, it omits the protection of Christians, despite the fact that more than 100 churches have been burned and vandalized in Canada since 2021. Second, it removes the safeguard of the Attorney General's consent under Section 319. This risks hate speech being weaponized as a political tool by any party in power by letting the government minister decide who gets charged. Third, it waters down the definition of hatred to something so vague and so subjective that it risks encroaching on the very Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
This government bill, Bill C-9, the Combating Hate Act. Let me begin where I think all of us in this House can agree. We support the objective of protecting vulnerable communities from the rising levels of hate and extremism that we see literally daily in this country. We support giving police and prosecutors the tools they need to keep Canadians safe from coast to coast, in their homes, in their schools, in their places of worship, and in community spaces.
So Bill C-9 would get rid of that, which is going to likely lead to far more hate speech prosecutions and quite possibly a chilling effect on speech in Canada. It's a small step towards becoming like the United Kingdom, where you've got police knocking on the doors of citizens over some Twitter post against immigration or something. You know, we're not there, but that's the direction we're moving in.
I have three serious concerns about Bill C-9. First, it omits the protection of Christians, despite the fact that more than 100 churches have been burned and vandalized in Canada since 2021. Second, it removes the safeguard of the Attorney General's consent under Section 319. This risks hate speech being weaponized as a political tool by any party in power by letting the government minister decide who gets charged. Third, it waters down the definition of hatred to something so vague and so subjective that it risks encroaching on the very Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Now on to the censorship apparatus that is mobilizing against Canadians. Bill C-9 passed second reading. So now it's going to committee at the Justice Committee. We have Conservatives in there, obviously Andrew Lawton, Larry Brock, and there's going to be, obviously, I think, challenges. They're going to hear from experts. They're going to hear, who knows, maybe they're going to call in the people that the government funds to come and testify about how great this law is. And after committee, it goes back for third reading. After third reading, it goes to the Senate for the same process: first reading, second reading, committee, third reading. And if both bills are the same without amendments, then it goes to the Governor General for the royal assent and becomes law after the date it comes into action, or the date of the assent, which is the signature of the Governor General. We'll see what happens with that. This bill is concerning. A lot of the groups have come out, civil liberties groups like the CCLA, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, come out and said C-9 risks criminalizing peaceful protest. So C-9 removes the requirement for the Attorney General to consenting to adding hate prosecutions to an offense. So right now, for any police force and Crown, if they want to go and prosecute something as hate motivated, they have to go to the Attorney General and say, can you approve this? I don't think it's a very laborious task, but this bill would remove that step entirely for the hate motivated enhancement of any crime. So that's the first thing. And then it creates some new offenses. It's willfully promoting hatred against an identifiable group by displaying certain symbols, like extremist symbols, in public place. And then it adds a hate crime offense when an offense is motivated by hatred based on protected characteristics like race, religion, etc. And of course, this already exists. And then intimidation offense, where intimidating a person to impede them from accessing a religious or cultural place or a place used by an identifiable group for a certain purpose. At first, you might hear this and think, well, this sounds really good. They're going to stop people from protesting churches every day and blocking streets for prayer. I don't really think that would ever happen. I think we'll see that police discretion, Crown discretion used to go one way. And unfortunately, that's the way that it's been going in Canada. So I have no other reason to believe otherwise. When we see the pro-Palestinians having their charges and their fines dropped, but we see years never-ending prosecutions of people like Tamara Litch and Chris Barber and everyone else in the convoy, then I can think that no, it's not equal, and prosecutorial and policing decisions aren't made equally in this country. And I have to be proven otherwise, because that's what I'm seeing right now. So it also adds an obstruction offense, intentionally obstructing or interfering with lawful access to such places. Again, it might sound great. Oh, you can't block churches anymore, but I think in practice we won't see that carried out such a way. Short act title is Combating Hate Act. Again, criminal code has statutes for this. There's already all kinds of offenses for all these things: intimidation, mischief, assault, whatever. There's also Bill C-8, which gives the government the power, the minister, the power to take people off the internet or off the phone without any judicial oversight, no due process. They can say, oh, posted something mean about me off the internet. You go, then you have to sign an agreement to not talk about it. So that's total totalitarianism. There's no justification for that in a free and democratic society. Bill C-8, C-9, they're both stepping on us more and more, and they're only ever going to go one way, the way that helps the government achieve and advance its narrative.
All right, I fear that there have been developments in the Canada's becoming more like the US every single day saga. Enter Bill C-9, also known as the Combating Hate Act. Now, when we first hear combating hate, we're like, slay, that honestly sounds pretty good. Well, obviously, we don't like hate. We hate hate. However, when we look a bit deeper into this new act, it is actually rather horrific. First, Bill C-9 makes the display of hateful symbols an offense. The issue, however, is that the bill provides discretionary powers to the police to determine what a hateful symbol actually is. So, as we've seen in lots of other parts of the world, in the US, in the UK, and parts of Europe, etc., we've seen the Palestinian flag literally be deemed a hateful symbol. We've seen anti-genocide protesters and anti-genocide groups be determined to be terrorist groups. And then literal Nazis, literal pro-white supremacist groups are not deemed to be hateful. And the issue is that this same logic, this same logic, for lack of a better word, could be used based on this bill. So what we could end up seeing is that instead of actual hate being cracked down on, we could end up just having literal freedom of expression, freedom of speech be cracked down on by groups who are seen as opposing the government. Next, the consequences for being found to be displaying hate are increased. So now you can go to jail and there's going to be increased jail time. And of course, the point of this is actually so that folks who maybe would have gone to a protest before are now going to be much more scared to go to a protest. So, for example, folks who maybe have precarious citizenship, or folks who are struggling to get a job and need to make sure that they don't have a criminal record, whereas maybe before they would have been more likely to go to a protest, now they might feel very unsafe going to a protest because they know that there's much higher likelihood that they might be put in jail, and if they are put in jail, that their sentence time will be longer and that their conviction will also be more harsh. So again, this is going to be cracking down on the freedom of expression of folks mostly on the left. And then third, the bill also creates new definitions and broader definitions of what intimidation and obstruction actually mean. So there's already consequences in existing law for intimidation and obstruction, and there's clear definitions of what that is. But in this bill, in Bill C-9, basically those definitions are now going to be broadened. And this also gives the police officers discretionary power to decide what people's intentions are. So basically what this all means is that police can determine whether someone is intimidating another person, whether their intention was intimidation. And so this will likely result in a lot of arbitrary arrests. So what can we actually do about this? Well, the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group has a form that you can fill out, and it will automatically generate an email for you to be sent to your MP, the PM, and any other kind of relevant politicians based on where you live. So I would highly recommend that you fill out that form. I'm going to link it in my bio. So I'll put the link to the International Civil Liberties form. You can then also read more about the bill and also generate that the automatic email to be sent to show that you are against Bill C-9. This bill is, as I said, very much going to crack down on any activist work that we can do, and also going to crack down on anti-genocide, pro-Palestine work. So it's really important that we try to overturn this bill before it finishes in its second hearing.
Well, I find it pretty amusing we're seeing Bill C-9 pass quietly through the House of Commons after just speaking about Bill C-8, the telecommunications bill. Now, what I find very bizarre, what is the sudden urgency? Why is this a main priority to our Liberal government to start passing new social media laws? Are they scared that another election is coming? Do they not want the truth to get out anymore? I just find it very bizarre that Bill C-9 includes hate speech, which, once again, a minister would be able to decide whether or not they pose that as a threat. And some of the wording in that bill is very alarming to me. It includes things like anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, transphobia. But what they failed to mention was anything that had to do with the surge in crime against Christians. I mean, if this truly is an amendment of the criminal code, which already covers this under section 319, I wonder what they're trying to amend. Leaving out big wording like that poses a threat. You're probably asking, Brianna, what is the big deal? If you say something crazy online, you should be held accountable for it. Yes. But the government can get way too far with this. Let's take a look at what happened when the UK passed their Online Harmful Speech Act.
Then, obviously, if you've got stuff you'd like to gather, obviously I'm more than willing to talk through what you're able to take with you.
What, you're taking me away now?
Yes, so you're under arrest, so you're going to Harrogate, unfortunately.
You're taking me to Harrogate in the middle of the night over a tweet?
I am, unfortunately.
Is this what you signed up the police to do?
This is
Yeah, a tweet. An anti-Hamas tweet, an anti-terrorist organization tweet shouldn't be an issue considering it's a banned terrorist organization. If these are the things that political discourse or political disagreement content creators are going to have to deal with, the government shutting down our phones, our Wi-Fi, and arresting us for what we say, it's no longer a democracy. These bills that are passing through the House of Commons aren't just a coincidence. There's a reason why they're the very first tabled bills of this session, and it should be alarming to everybody. What is the urgency to have these bills be passed? And why is this a priority? You shut down the crimes bill, but you're trying to implement combating hate speech bill? Give me a break. Life's tough. Wear a helmet.
Hey, Mark Carney, you creepy little worm. You work for us. Your job as the Prime Minister of Canada is to give us more rights, not to take them away. Bill C-9, the so-called Combating Hate Act, is the most extreme attack on Canadians' free speech we have ever seen in this country. It is more extreme than the Online Safety Act that was passed in the UK that's seen 12,000 Brits jailed a year, 30 Brits jailed a day for opinions that they're sharing. Bill C-9 is much more extreme than that. It removes the AG, removes the Attorney General, who is supposed to be a guardrail on so-called hate speech laws, to ensure that it actually was hate, whatever that means, that was coming out of your mouth. It removes the Attorney General completely from the process and expands the definition of hate to so-called fomentation of detestation and vilification, which is more extreme than disdain. So we're going off emotions. We are literally basing our political system on someone's emotions to determine what is hateful and what is not hateful. If Bill C-9 is allowed to pass, we are telling the Canadian government that we are going to allow them to quiet us because of our beliefs. This is Orwell on steroids. Orwell could not have dreamed this up. The danger that this brings to the Canadian people, a so-called free country, is literally unprecedented. I've never seen something as extreme as Bill C-9 for our fundamental right as Canadians to express ourselves. If you can cut a man's tongue out, you turn him into less than a man. It's our fundamental right as Canadians, as human beings, to express our opinions. And the reason that free speech exists is for speech that you do not like. We're not all going to agree on the vast majority of the issues. You may think that me saying that a man cannot become a woman and a woman cannot become a man is hate speech. You may think that me saying that 500,000 people coming from the Middle East in the past 3 years is not good for the country of Canada. That does not give you the right to throw me in jail. Unless we're living in a communist country. If we're living in a communist country, this is a textbook communist law where if you say something that doesn't line up with the ideology of the ruling party, you are thrown in prison. I personally found it incredibly hateful when during COVID, Justin Trudeau came out and said that if you didn't want to take the vaccine, you were likely a racist or a misogynist. I found that to be incredibly hateful. Do I think the man should be in jail for it? I think he should be in jail for other things, but certainly not that. The man can express himself as he sees fit. Under this new Bill C-9, it's not about hate speech. It's about speech that the Liberal Party of Canada hates. You can already see with the angle that they've taken in writing the speech and specifically pointing out swastikas. Now, I'm no friend of the Nazis, but they don't mention the hammer and sickle, which killed tens of millions of people during World War II. You can tell that this speech is aimed at silencing dissent, silencing people who want to criticize issues like immigration. You bet your ass that if you say that bringing 8 million people into this country in the past decade, many of whom are from civilizations wildly different than our own, that's going to be classified as hate speech, and they're going to start jailing people. This is communism 101. This is straight out of Mao, Pol Pot, Lenin's playbook. Canadians, open your eyes to what is going on. The freedom of speech and sovereignty are the two pillars of Western civilization. And if we allow our government to tell us what we are and aren't allowed to think, we're no longer human. You're not a human being if you're not allowed to freely express your thoughts on any issue. And also the fact that they are attempting to implement this law directly after the assassination of Charlie Kirk is so disgusting to me. to time it immediately after the assassination of a man who, first and foremost, was an absolute champion for free speech. His whole modus operandi was going onto college campuses and speaking to students that he disagreed with, because he knew that if you can't speak with people who you don't agree with, the next step is violence, and violence leads to civil war. So that's why a guy like Kirk went out there and said, you may disagree with me, you may not like a word that comes out of my mouth, but we need to be able to sit across from one another and have a discussion. That's the only way that the differences in this country are going to be ironed out. To see the Canadian government, a couple of days after his assassination, introduce Bill C-9, trying to take advantage of the politically tumultuous situation, is disgusting. And it's what these commies always do. They try to take advantage of a disaster to give themselves more and more power. We saw the exact same thing during COVID. It's the same thing out of a communist playbook. You see any tumult and you take advantage to strip away people's rights and freedoms, which is exactly what we're seeing in Canada. You don't think that the Liberal Party knows that their policies over the past decade have caused skyrocketing crime rates in this country, have caused in excess of 70,000 people in Canada to die a year because of a broken healthcare system, has caused a housing crisis unlike anywhere we've seen in the G7, where people can't afford the basic necessities of life? No, they are intentionally ushering in worse and worse times in Canada because they know that will allow them to continue to strip away their rights and freedom. Bill C-9 is just the first step in their authoritarian playbook to eventually introduce digital IDs. They're also already introducing a bill that would say that you cannot spend more than $10,000 cash at a time, getting rid of cash so that they can freeze all of your money. But these digital IDs, central digital banking currencies, these are all part of their ultimate plot to strip away your autonomy as a human being, have more and more government control. And we need a reminder in Canada to these goddamn politicians that they work for us. It's not the other way around. They're not put into office to strip our rights and freedoms away. They're there to give us more rights and freedoms. Bill C-9 is the exact opposite of that. They want you scared to open your mouth. If you have an opinion that's outside of the mainstream, that's critical of these far-left politicians, they want you to be scared to open your mouth. But it's just going to embolden us. It's going to do the exact opposite of that. I am setting up a petition because, in my estimation, this is the most extreme, dangerous bill we've seen among many horrific bills that Carney has introduced. I'm going to be setting up a petition to sign to make it known how displeased the Canadians are with this bill, how we refuse to accept to be silenced and have our tongues cut out. Stay tuned. I'll be putting a link where you can sign and voice your displeasure and let the government know that Bill C-9 will not ever be acceptable in a free and open Canada. Stay tuned for that information. Please like, share, subscribe, join, become a member. If you're interested in supporting my work, I really appreciate it. It takes a lot of work to get these videos out. If you're following on TikTok, make sure you're following YouTube, youtube.com/AppFightForCanada 2025. Canadians must say no to Bill C-9. It is an extremist communist attack on our fundamental right to free speech.
Hi everyone. Yes, I'm using a filter because I feel like, not so cute today. I just wanted to come on here and talk about Bill C-9. So it's another bill that's going to further cut us off from society and the rest of the world. What I mean by that is, on Facebook and on social media here in Canada, you don't really see the news, right? Well, now, along with not being able to protest our government because they accuse us of trying to overturn them, and then they send out the guard, and then of course, people get arrested, people get hurt, and people lose their jobs and lose their livelihoods and go to jail, all that fun stuff that they're doing to Tamara Lynch and Chris and all them. So, we already know what happens when we try to protest our government, right? Freeze, bank accounts get frozen, all that stuff. And then for 2 or 3 years now, for 2 years at least anyway, we've had Palestinian people and terrorist sympathizers, protesting in the streets. And, they do get violent, they get hateful, and, they have done some damage. And nothing is done. Actually, they are protected by the police. We can't, as Christians, go and pray in public because we could hurt somebody's feelings by doing that, but Muslims can block off whole streets and pray, which is something they don't do where they come from, by the way. This is just a power flex, you know what I mean? Oh, look, we have more rights than you in your own country, right? Which is true. They do have more rights than we do. Just like the criminals. The criminals have more rights than the victims in this country because there is a two-tier justice system. And if people don't see that, then you're flipping blind. Now, Bill C-9, you won't be able to say nothing. Nothing. Because it'll be hate speech. And who gets to deem what is hate speech and what isn't? Because I thought that all speech was protected. Because all speech was needed. Now, grant you the consequences of what you say isn't protected. Because, just like you have a right to say something, companies and people have a right to not like it. You know what I mean? And not let you get away with it. Which is what happened to Roseanne Barr in 2018 when she went on some rant. And even though she was correct about her rant, ABC, they cut off her show. They got rid of her, right? Now what happens to Jimmy Kimmel, and just because Jimmy Kimmel's on the left, it's attack on free speech now. They weren't worried about free speech when it came to Roseanne. Or when it came to anyone that supported Donald Trump in the first term, because when Joe Biden became president, it was just pick, pack. Everybody was getting arrested and charged and put in jail, and all of this stuff is easily found, okay? I'm not making none of this shit up. This shit actually happened, and it's not my fault if people have bad memories. But I have a very good one when it comes to this stuff. And I'm going to tell you one thing. A lot of people over the last 4 years have lost their freedom, their livelihoods, and some of them have lost their lives. And then Charlie Kirk gets there talking to college students who are being indoctrinated by these insane people. And I know, because I just spent 5 years in university, graduated in 2023. I know what they do to students. Did it turn me into a liberal? No, it forced me to turn closer to God, and it made me more of a conservative because I saw what was happening. You know what I mean? So it's people have to understand that this Bill C-9, it is to stop us completely, to shut us up. That's what it's all about. I just recommend everybody getting themselves a VPN. And then once they start doing that to us here in Canada, we just tap into a US VPN, and they won't have any access to us. It worked for me when TikTok was banned in the US. I didn't have TikTok, and I'm here in Canada, right? So then somebody reminded me, do you have a VPN? And yes, I do have a VPN. So I go into my VPN and I see that I was logged into a US server. So then I just logged into one in Montreal here in Canada, and boom, my TikTok was back. So when it comes to that, we can just, if you have a VPN, private internet access has a great one. They gave me a great deal for 3.5 years, $175 Canadian. And it comes with antivirus and stuff. You can put it all on all of your devices. So, but still, Canadians aren't going to be able to speak up anymore because we're going to get put in jail for it. You know what I mean? And just think about this. Just think about this. They're letting murderers walk. Rapists, drug traffickers, they're allowing them out. They're allowing people, like, I think in BC, there's like, I don't know, like a few dozen people and like thousands of arrests in a year between these people. And they're still free. They're out there. But they're going to put away people that say something against the government. That's true. Like, so let that sink in. They don't care about us. They don't want us to have rights because we really don't. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms isn't worth the piece of paper it's written on. It's an illusion. It's to give us the illusion of rights, but we don't have them. So, and we're starting to learn that, right? Like, if you're not catching on, like, as to why we have, like, over 300,000 homeless people in this country, and most of them are from this country, and they can't afford the rent, they can't afford the bills, but people can come to this country from anywhere in the world, and they get, like, you know, living allowance daily. They get place to live. They get money for furniture. And they get an allowance for a certain amount of time while they're here until they get on their feet. How many Canadians have gotten that? Like, really though, we don't get that stuff. Why? Well, let me tell you why. Because we're just the workhorses here. We're the ones that are giving the government the power to send all this money to Ukraine and send all this money to, you know, NGOs that are developing projects for gender equity. Like, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like, they make up stuff. Like, this stuff didn't exist 10 years ago. Like, why are people waking up to it? I don't get it. And all they'll say is, oh, conspiracy theorist. Oh, you're just an extremist. Oh, being a concerned Canadian makes me an extremist now. Believing in traditional values makes me an extremist according to the RCMP. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, we're supposed to be living in a country that was founded on Christian principles. I mean, it's in our anthem. It's in our Constitution. We have to swear on a Bible, a holy Bible, not a Quran, a Bible before we testify in a court of law. Like, hello? Like, what are we doing? I'm telling you, something's got to give. And, you know, now Mark Carney's going behind Trump's back, making deals with Mexico and stuff. Like, this is not going to end well. And we're the ones that are going to have to deal with it. So I say no to Bill C-9. No. Like a hard pass. Like, large no. And for those of you that think that it's a great idea, move to China for a few months and then tell me how much you love it. Okay? If you want it so bad, move to a communist country. Stop trying to make this one like the hellholes y'all come from. I love you guys. I'm out though.